The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Welcome to it. It's a Roadshow Thursday. We're here at the Single Barrel, 9th and P, inside the Graduate, downtown Lincoln. A trifecta of road shows here as we get you into Nebraska-Michigan. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. We're powered by your friends at Hurrdat Sports, 489-1240. 489-1240. We're down here at the Single Barrel till 6 o'clock today. And we are excited. Plenty of news to get into with Nebraska and the surgery that will be happening at South Stadium. There's a loud rejoice for many Nebraska fans. We'll dive into that and the job Trev and company are taking on for you, the fan. Stand up and clap. 18 months till this thing gets going. But it's within the long-term, big-picture outlook of Nebraska football and athletics. So we'll get there. We'll talk more Nebraska-Michigan. Brandon Vogel is going to be with us from Counter Read in about 15 minutes. In hour two, Gary Barnett. We'll talk option and how the option can work against Michigan and just his thoughts on the college football weekend schedule. And then Bill Bender with the sporting news. He'll join us in hour two. Can email the show, chris@hailvarsity.com, and also 800-825-5865. The stream is open, and you're welcome to watch the show, the Hail Varsity YouTube channel. Check that out, or the Hail Varsity Radio Twitter feed at HVarsity Radio. So, Elijah, let me ask you this. Have you done, or do you know anybody that is built for demolition work? Construction, armed forces. I mean, either pick your poison here. Have you done any demo work?
I've demoed a house.
So you've done the demo work yourself. You've grabbed the gloves. You've grabbed the sledgehammer. You put the goggles on.
Crowbar.
You got out your shirt, your sleeveless Guns N' Roses, or dare I say Pearl Jam T-shirt. And you just went to work with some ripped jeans.
Yeah, no. So this would have been, let's see. I guess I've technically done demo twice. The first time around, I was going into fourth grade, so I wasn't old enough to actually do all that much. The second time, I was.
You just helped.
Yeah. The second time was seventh grade, in which case I had a lot more work to do. Apparently, once you turn 12, you're old enough to do that sort of thing now. I'm not sure the difference is between 12 and 9, but alas, at age 12.
Your bench press, that's the difference.
Well, we moved into a new house, and we were actually stuck living in the attic for a couple months while we demoed downstairs. So it'd be like, wake up in the attic, have your microwave meal, head off to school, and then come back home, and all evening, it's working on homework and it's demo in the house. And then we're gonna get it done that way. So there's a couple months of that, and
was it fun? Was the demo part fun?
Incredibly fun. Do you know how much fun it is to take a crowbar and just jam it into a wall and just try to tear holes out of it? Because there's an old house in central Lincoln and all the walls are lath and plaster, which I'm not sure if you know about. It's like the old Tom and Jerry, where it's the little slats of wood and they plaster over it, and that's like the old version of drywall. So we removed that out of the entire first floor to get in new drywall and new insulation to help with some of the heating and cooling costs. And I cannot remember, maybe my dad will text me if he's listening, how many tons of lath and plaster we hauled out of that thing, because it was like tearing it out. And then me and my brother were the ones that would take this trash can full of lath and plaster and carry it out to the dumpster out front and dump it up over the walls of the dumpster. We were like the muscle of seventh graders of like, yeah, we don't trust you to do any technical work, but you guys can be muscle. So we did a whole bunch of that. Unfortunately, we didn't get any explosives like they're going to have at South Stadium. That would have made the job a lot more fun.
Well, you're right. I mean, because you're gonna bring this puppy down, and South Stadium was built up in '64, re-upped in '72, and then has existed the way it's been for quite a while. It's the last domino to fall with this complete revamp of Memorial Stadium. In 98, you had the West Stadium go up. In the early 2000s, you had North Stadium get their facelift. And then a little bit later on, the East Stadium got built up. And it's incredible. It's immaculate. It's a symbol of the state. All right, folks come from far and near to go check out football on Saturdays. There's been better football some years than others, and you've got Michigan coming into town, and it's something that I want to ask this question. Would you be the guy or be the gal to push the button, to bring it all down? Would you enter a contest? Would you make a sizable donation? Would you pool all of your neighbors together and say, here's X thousands of dollars. I want to hit the button. I want to pull the switch. I want this thing to go down. And listen, growing up, we had seats. My dad was great with his timing. And during the Danny Nee era, we had Section B seats, kind of catty corner to the court. It was wonderful. During the 60 and 3 era, really before that, from about 1991 through 98, my father had season tickets in the West balcony. So that's where we got to sit. And this is before all the improvements in the facelifting started. So I remember as a kid going to the first night game I ever got to see, which was Washington, National Championship Washington, Steve Epman, Mark Brunell. It was incredible, but you had to wind through a lot of 1924 to get up there. There was no escalator. There was no elevator. There was just a fat kid with asthma trucking behind mom, dad, and my little brother. So that was interesting, but it was worth it, even though Nebraska lost. I remember freezing my butt off the one time I had great seats in South Stadium, and it was the 1990 Colorado game. Nebraska lost that in the fourth quarter. And then also the last time I got to go to a game with my dad and cousin Dino all together, this was back in 2008. We were, if you're staring at South Stadium, as you fan out, there's those slices. They're almost like pizza slices before you get to West and before you get to East. Kind of that angled spot, okay? That's where we all got to sit together and watch Bo lose it on the sideline and Sue get a penalty, okay? Tyrod Taylor in 2008. So I have fond memories of South Stadium, but I was never dealing with a kid or was a problem, air quote, child to be, tugging on my dad's shirt or mom's shirt saying, I need a runza, I need a hot dog. I was kind of there to watch the game. And we were lucky too, because when folks would bring that Coca-Cola up, we were within sight line to get fed and watered enough. But that wasn't what I was about. I wanted to watch football and hang out with family.
Well,
so
that's the big problem with South Stadium.
I don't have bad experiences of South Stadium, but I've been there like 3 times in my life. We can line up phone calls and StreamYard inputs about horror stories from South Stadium, because that's the response, isn't it, Elijah? That's what this reaction is about detonating South Stadium. It's, hey, thanks for the memories and thank God. I mean, that's it. It's time to go, and it's time to build up, and it's something as simple as construction. Yeah, woohoo! But hey, it's another investment in Nebraska. The question is this, Elijah: what's Nebraska football look like in 3 years when this thing's done? What's the supply versus the demand?
Yeah, that's a big question, but you kind of laid out a couple of the reasons why. Quick story here. Okay, so the big problem that I saw with South Stadium, I caught my fair share of games in the student section there, and the big problem is not just student section, but anyone in South Stadium. there's no convenient concession stands. If you're 90 rows up, you got to go down 90 rows.
Row 98.
You got to go all the way down to the bottom to get to your concessions or go to the bathroom or what have you. And if you're in the student section, like, good luck getting any of those people carrying around the Pepsi or carrying around the Runzas or carrying the pizza to come to you, because the student section was always a mess. And the greatest example of that is my buddy Robert. So I was watching a game with him, and here comes the Runza man coming by. And Robert was very hungry. Robert did not have any cash. So he's sitting there in the row negotiating with the Runza guy, like, hey, I have $5 on this Raising Cane's gift card. I'll give it to you if you give me the Runza. And the guy's like, I don't believe you. There's no way.
Barter?
No, and he ended up getting the Runza. He ended up trading a half-used gift card for a Runza, and it worked out. But, like, that's the problem that those poor individuals deal with when going to the student section. So there was never any good concessions for the student section. You have to walk down all those stairs and down all the ramps to make it to a bathroom or to make it to a concession stand. You only have like 2 or 3 gates on that south side to make it into the stadium, so you're always dealing with long lines. South Stadium, I have fond memories from my time in the student section there, the games I have caught there, but at the end of the day, it's time for modernization. There are some problems with this plan, which are going to come naturally. Trev kind of talked about some of those. It's going to be a real pain for everybody for 1 to 2 seasons as they build it. I think there's still some question marks about what this is going to look like in the end. I was talking with you, Schmidt, before the show just about how generic these renderings they've made of South Stadium are. There's no detail to them whatsoever. They're all from 1,000 feet in the air. I think there's still some work that needs to be done, but I think that this is probably, all things considered, the right way to go about fixing some of the problems that naturally lie within South Stadium. And I'm excited for it. Biggest question in my mind, though, is how greatly does this benefit the student section in the long run, and what is the plan for them in the short term whenever you tear down South Stadium? Like, what are you going to do with the student section for 1 to 2 seasons while there is no South Stadium there? Because the student section, it's what makes the atmosphere at Memorial Stadium. They're the ones who really, I know they don't pay the money, but they're the students that go there. They're the ones who deserve the seats the most, in my opinion. Maybe that just comes from somebody who graduated college most recently, but I think the student section, the student body at the University of Nebraska, it's what makes the university tick. They're the ones that deserve seats the most. What are you going to do with them while South Stadium gets torn down and replaced? There's some questions, a lot of questions that remain to be seen with this project, but I think it is exciting with what the future can be 10 years from now with Memorial Stadium and Husker football.
Well, and listen, with this whole rebuild topic, you brought in a coach to do it. Brent chimes in, 85 Florida State, McCathorn Clayton. He was 9, not McCathorn, but Brent. And it was in the student section. I grew up a lot that day. That means to me you had some a plastic bottle of McCormick's vodka near you, didn't you, Brent? Well, I mean, it's not going to make as much noise, and it could fall over and not break. Just saying.
9.
No, I'm not saying he snuck it in. I'm saying you sat by people that were probably imbibing. I get it, though. Listen, Nebraska needs to be in a place in 3 years on the field to garner some energy. And I think they're working that way to be a good football team again. So whether you're a student or whether you're a fan who's had season tickets for 25 years, whether you're thinking about investing as a young professional to go to Nebraska games, because likely you grew up going or you've been a few times, you've got a choice to make on how to spend your disposable income. Things are expensive. And Trev is all about using this thing being the gray old lady on 10th and Vine, more than just 7 times a year during the fall, 8 if you talk about the spring game. He's talking more about the Garth Brooks moments or the Larry the Cable Guy moments. I mean, and that's all part of this plan. It's not all specific yet, but it is. They're going to do this thing right, I have no doubt. And it comes down to what kind of product are you going to have on the field to help create some of that energy. Because, listen, you nailed it with the fans and, of course, the students. The students bring the energy, bring the intensity, bring the
home field advantage.
The edge. They bring the edge. They bring that uncomfortable vibe in a great way that you'll want on 3rd down and 9. you want everyone hoarse walking out of there because you helped chip in with your emotion and you made it really, really difficult. Nebraska football, since joining the Big Ten, is 25-25 at Memorial Stadium in Big Ten games. That has to change. Twice. That's it. The number of times Nebraska's gone undefeated at home in Big Ten play. 2012, 2016. And you can't live like that, and you're going to even be in a more difficult conference once Hollywood and the Great Northwest move into the Big Ten. So the time is now to upgrade. The time is now to put your money where your mouth is and be the guy or gal that bids to blow up South Stadium, and then have the opportunity to, yes, put the students on top of whether Colorado's visiting, whether it's Oklahoma, whether it's USC coming to town. There's been some electric moments, man. There's been some just absolutely jacked crowds that have been let down. And then there's been some jacked crowds that absolutely helped deliver an upset win. I don't know that happens Saturday. We'll get into it a little more with Brandon Vogel, get his take on stadium expansion. And we're down here at the Single Barrel.
And Schmidt, I'll tell you right now, I don't care to bid on blowing up South Stadium, but I will bid for a front row seat. I will pregame the implosion.
So it's a live road show as South Stadium comes crashing down.
Yes.
We'll get the hard hats ready. Brandon Vogel is putting his eye black on right now.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Thanks for hanging out. Hail Varsity on the road today here at the Single Barrel, 9th and P. We have snuck in before Michigan does, as we are here Thursday. Back next time for Northwestern week. We're at the bar this Saturday, pregame and postgame. And we're at the Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill tomorrow. We welcome in Brandon Vogel, counter read, and give him a follow at Brandon L. Vogel. Subscribe, counterread.com, as Vogues is in his football office. No sledgehammer or hard hat with Vogues today, but it's just a matter of time. He can put some gloves on. Vogues, could you get in on this blow up South Stadium? Would you put a bid in for a lottery?
No, I would be a bidder though on the guy with the giant pair of scissors when the new South Stadium's ready to be officially opened. I've always wanted a giant pair of scissors, so that's kind of my vibe, I think.
No, Brandon, I noticed that Schmidt said that you don't have a hard hat or sledgehammer in there, but I do see that you have removed the urinal troughs from your football office. Was that a lot of work?
It was a lot of work. It was a little bit bittersweet. You know, it's nice when I'm in here and the game's going on. As we looked at where college football is headed, there's so many commercial breaks that I can go to the bathroom that's 6 feet away. So I did end up taking the trough out. Also, it was kind of a little bit of a sanitary gray area with 2 young kids at home. So you got to do what you got to do.
I have to ask this question. Am I a bad parent for sharing this story? But Junior's first game when he was little was Idaho State. And Junior had to go to the can. So we wandered down, and one of the bathrooms we went into, and I'm not sure if it was South Stadium or not, because Memorial Stadium has all sorts of troughs, all right? And Junior wasn't tall enough to stand up and let her fly. So we had to airlift Junior up to go. And it was a little risky to just have him stand on the edge while you're holding his back and have him go that way. Because he's, well, frankly, since he's a baby, since his changing table, he's had a spraying problem. He thinks it's always funny. So we had to kind of airlift him and hope that he hit the front of the rim, so to speak, or got enough arc to get in. It worked out. It was quick. It was easy, and he thought it was hilarious. He probably doesn't remember it, but that's how we rolled with the trough. And you'll have some Husker fans bid on that, dude. There's still a few bars on O Street that have a trough, from recollection anyway. So if you can sell the winningest AstroTurf for $25 for a square, someone's going to drop a G on a trough, don't you think? Either to put in their man cave or just to take back to their Husker bar, whatever part of the state they're in?
Yeah, I think you're right. It does work particularly well if it's a small town Husker bar. To be like, oh yeah, that's from Memorial Stadium. We made sure to get one of those. But yeah, judging from the amount of conversation around that, and I mean, it's kind of hard not to have it. It's an unforgettable experience if you've ever experienced it. So,
and one of the things I will say to the credit of the Troughs, there's never like that big of a line in the male restroom, at least because of the troughs. Like you can squeeze a lot of people in there. People get in, people get out. It works well. I went to Kinnick one time and had to stand in line waiting for the urinals because there's like 24 urinals in there, which is a lot, but you can fit like 60 people in those troughs if you really have to go. You can like squeeze in a little space. So I wouldn't mind seeing those kept. We'll see, but I can also see the benefit of like somebody out there, a big tailgater, if you will. You can fill up that trough after being cleaned, obviously, with like a big thing of jungle juice. You can probably fit a lot in there.
Well, or just make it a would-be cooler as part of your tailgate and put the trough on the back of your smoker. That's
less fun. I feel like you can get some people around and be like, hey, we're drinking out of the urinal trough today. Like, it's a big game. Cleaned, obviously.
Yeah. No, I know.
It'd be an attraction to the tailgate.
It could be. Vogues, I still think Wrigley has troughs, don't they? Or have they completely redone them?
I don't recall. It's been a number of years since I was last at Wrigley. That one I don't remember. Yeah, couldn't tell you.
You gotta keep one trough there for the memories. All right, Nebraska-Michigan. What does Nebraska have to do, Vogues, to kind of bring Nebraska fan back? I don't think they've punted on the season, but they're not happy after Louisiana Tech. And here comes Michigan. The buzz is not great for this just because of how good Michigan is. So I want your thought on how this thing could go Saturday.
I think, they need to do what you would have to do against Michigan. You need to play well against a good opponent. And, Colorado was this weird sort of gray area. I still don't know how good Colorado is, but they beat TCU and they beat Nebraska. They opened the season with 2 P5 wins, which is more than most people, myself included, was penciling in for them. So that was a strange one where Nebraska was initially favored and then it flipped, but it was still a pretty tight line. You handled business against Northern Illinois. Slightly lesser degree against Louisiana Tech, but I do think Nebraska is making progress. It's kind of slow and steady, which Matt Rule, to his credit, kind of alluded to leading up to the season, and then he flat out said it, during the year. So it's going to take. I mean, when you think about kind of new coaching regimes that work. You usually see one of these results, even in a year one that's not good. Lance Leipold went 2-10 his first year at Kansas, beat Texas though. And since then, I mean, I think prior to that, they were being outscored by an average of like 25 points a game. Since then, which was in 2021, they're outscoring opponents by an average of 2. And you've seen like the range of results that's been, and here they are now at 4-0. And I mean, that's the path that Nebraska's on. So if it's just, a little slower than anybody would like, I get it, because you do see these teams that pop pretty quickly, especially now. But that's not the way this is designed to go. Doesn't mean it can't. Definitely doesn't mean it can't if Nebraska should get a win on its home field against, yes, the number 2 team in the country. It's been a long time since something like that's happened. But, boy, I mean, maybe that's the fair question, too. Like, okay, Louisiana Tech, maybe not as clean and crisp as you would have liked. They come out and beat Michigan. All of a sudden, are we talking about Nebraska as Big Ten West favorite? Probably would be, honestly, because it would be the best win anybody in the West has so far.
Brandon, on the other side of this equation, though, if it does end up being an ugly game where Michigan, they have their will on the ground, they rack up, say, 250 yards on the ground, they have control of the game from beginning to end, and say it's a 35-7 type victory for Michigan. Does that change anything within Husker Nation over the final 7 games?
I mean, it probably it probably adds a few people to the skeptical bandwagon, which, as we kind of started this game discussion with, like there's it's not empty. There are people who are a little bit concerned, and something like that, like 35-7 is basically the game Michigan has played 4 times this season. And that was against East Carolina, Bowling Green, UNLV, who actually might be pretty good, and Rutgers, who's shown some life. So the easy line there to draw would be like, well, Nebraska is basically where those programs are at, and they just might be. So yeah, it would dull enthusiasm a little bit more, which would be hard to see after just 5 games. But you don't control the schedule. Michigan's number 2 for a reason. That said, like Michigan, is a really good team, really loaded talent-wise on both sides of the ball. They run the ball well. If you would have asked me coming in, I would have said they probably would have been running the ball a little bit better. That said, J.J. McCarthy has been a little bit better than I probably expected him to be too. So they're an interesting team.
Brandon Vogel's with us from Counter Read, counterread.com, at Brandon L. Vogel. It's where you find him on Twitter, and someday I'll quit saying Twitter, but that's what we're doing right now. So, Vogues, with the offense, that's the downer right now for Nebraska, and it's not pointing arrows at anybody. It's just the side of the football that's really frustrating and you don't have a ton of faith in. Are you feeling a little bit better with the big picture, what this offense can be at the end of the year, taking Saturday out of it?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, the run game, and it's, no matter which quarterback has been in there, has involved the quarterback to a large degree, which I think is a little bit of a necessity right now. But you kind of can't argue with the first half. Nebraska's 60th nationally in rushing. Second half, they're 4th. Matt Rule talked all offseason about being the better team in the fourth quarter. There's some evidence for that there. And then the passing game, it's not a well-oiled machine for Nebraska in any regard that way. But hey, if you can run the ball that well, particularly if you get to halftime and it's still a game, and you can lean on the run game a little bit more, which has been what we've seen, minus the Colorado game. All it takes is a couple of big plays in the passing game, and that might be enough. That's part of the reason, those coaches that choose to shorten the game do so. And we're seeing it with Michigan. Michigan's running 56 plays a game. They are glacial so far this year, which is a departure from last year. And it makes Saturday pretty interesting to me because we've seen what Nebraska's defense can do. If it gets 2 stops, if it stops 2 drives in the first half, how many does that leave? Maybe 3 that Michigan has that, I guess if they score touchdowns on all 3, then it's 21 to something if Nebraska could manage a score. But I think Nebraska has a decent chance if the defense plays like we've seen it play against, granted, the best offense it's seen, to keep this close going into half. And if it does that, all of a sudden, I think things change. The stadium's alive. You've got, Clemson fans sitting at home who are flipping in. It's let's see if the number 2 team in the country is in trouble. That's, I think, the path for Nebraska in this game.
It's Brandon Vogel with us here. And Brandon, I guess we're not going to ask you for a score prediction because that's going to come on Saturday. But generally, how are you feeling on a Thursday? Good? Do you feel good about this one? Because I feel like the buzz in Husker Nation, we only have about 30 seconds here. The buzz in Husker Nation this week has been down.
Yeah, I feel like Nebraska's got a good shot. They're at home. Michigan's good. Maybe not an A+ based on their first 4 games. Maybe just an A-. And with the way the game will be played, the way both teams want to play, I think if Nebraska can get, like I said, just a couple of those stops early, much less a big change play, then all of a sudden things get interesting.
It's Brandon Vogel. Subscribe to him, counterread.com. Vogues, we'll talk Saturday, bud.
Sounds good, guys. Thanks.
Hail Varsity Radio is live. Now, back to Schmitty.
Schmitty's a great guy, but he don't have a brain.
And Elijah.
You want me to speak? When I point at you, yeah.
On Hail Varsity Radio.
Back here at the Single Barrel Roadshow Thursday for Hail Varsity. 9th and P is where we're at inside the Graduate, and a lot of red going to be making their way to Lincoln, and some blue too with Michigan invading. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. We're powered by Hurrdat Sports. Big thanks to Brandon Vogel, Gary Barnett in about 30 minutes, and then Bill Bender. Time for you to get in here if you want. 489-1240. But your first experience in the student section was what? Because we're talking about the students.
Oh, I know this.
Yeah, right. We're talking about the student section. We're talking about them possibly being displaced. We're talking about Trev and the renovation project for South Stadium. What would you spend to push the button to take it down? Let's hear from Trev. He was asked that question today when it comes to, well, putting your money where your mouth is. Trev on Let's Talk, as he put it, with blowing up South Stadium.
You know, we have lots of people who are really creative. They have lots of ideas in our department. So as my wife tells me, sometimes we can't use all your ideas, Trev, but we'll, well, you know what? This is, we can have a little fun along the way. And so we'll see, you know, but if you're volunteering to make a donation to be the person who gets to push the button, you know, maybe we can talk.
What's that number look like? Is it 50 grand? I mean, we're talking about a $450 million deal here. It's almost $500 million for Nebraska. We'll get into some of your comments here. Cutter asks a valuable question, Elijah, about what if the impossible happens? What if that 2% is 2% turns into 98% with Nebraska upsetting Michigan, dogged at home by 17 points. Do you think if we win, says Cutter, the crowd will storm the field? I don't think I can remember in my time as a Husker fan when we've ever done that. We've huddled up with the old Average Joe Sports Show podcast, and I think we came up with 1992.
Yeah, so there's some conflicting information online, but putting our heads together, that's Bill Dolman, Mitch Sherman, you and me, as well, Schmitty. We put our heads together. Some people said 95 OU. Mitch was in the stadium that day. He said he didn't remember that. Yeah. And I couldn't find any video evidence online. Other people said Colorado 94, which I also could not find any video evidence of online. So you have to go back to 92. And from what we discussed, there was back-to-back weeks. Colorado, who is number 8 in the country, followed by Kansas, number 13 in the country. And apparently back-to-back weeks of storming the field. And that may have been the last time the field was stormed at Memorial Stadium, though the other fans have stormed the field against Nebraska. Oklahoma did it once. Missouri did it once. So Nebraska's been a part of field stormings, but at Memorial Stadium, you might have to go back 31 years.
You do. I think it was 92. It was those back-to-back games before the dreaded loss at Iowa State. Montana Husker fan chimes in with their experience. And they were a sophomore in high school. And El Roberson, Darren Sproles, that was Frank's final game in Lincoln in 03. That was an awesome Kansas State team that finished fourth, or at least were fourth in the country at one point that year. And they ended up going to the Fiesta Bowl that year, winning the Big 12. They absolutely body slammed Oklahoma in the Big 12 championship game. Chris chimes in. 78 Oklahoma for him. OU is in town. The Herbies beat the Sooners 17-14. I have heard stories about this game from so many loved ones, Chris. Jarvis Redwine, Andre Franklin, Junior Miller. It was cold. It was glorious. I think Kelly Phelps got shot by a man named Rude on a kickoff. You've seen that highlight before. On the sideline, oranges were frozen and thrown from the south end zone. The week after, you lost to Missouri. Sorry, I was a little less than a year old then. Brennan says 95 was Colorado, and I think 94 was Lincoln. 96 was Lincoln. 95 was Colorado, but It was 96 was that cold, and there was that black ice ball game, Elijah. That was my freshman year of college, and we were in the student section for that.
Well,
it was me and my friend Captain Morgan.
It's funny hearing all these stories of everyone having a great time their first Husker game. My first ever Husker game was a loss back in, I think, 06. My first game as a student was a win. It was 2017. Arkansas State was in town, and if you remember, student section started clearing out. Arkansas State was giving Nebraska a run for their money. Nebraska pulls away. Most people start clearing out, and then Arkansas State recovers an onside kick and just about scares Nebraska. And you go, well, at least they got the win. And then you followed up 2 weeks later with my second game in the student section, a loss to Northern Illinois because Tanner Lee threw a 98-yard pick six or something like that on the first drive of the game. So it's great to see all these stories of people enjoying their time in South End Zone as compared to me, where it's the scare of all time from Arkansas State and then a disappointing loss to Northern Illinois, and the year culminated in Mike Riley being fired and then a couple of 3-9 seasons following that. So I had a great time every single time I was in South Stadium, obviously.
Well, listen, it is going to be imperative that Nebraska continues to build and get good on the field to give you something to cheer about in the stands, whether it's a chair back, whether it's more personal space. It's been a love affair for a lot of years because this is your pride and joy. It's been Nebraska football, and you put up with some tough years. You put up with a lot of great years. I mean, you got to experience those to heights that many places don't ever reach. And right now you're trying to climb back up, and it's very apropos with what's symbolic here as you're trying to take down and build back up. That's what you're doing on the field, and it's been an ongoing process. You have a new designer trying to get with the architect and put this thing in the proper place. You've hired and fired a lot of different architects and planners over the years, and you're finally trying to get it right. So it's not a donut, right? You're no right angles in the house, said Axel Foley at one point in Beverly Hills Cop. Do we have time for Trev when it comes to goals with Project?
We do not this segment, no.
We'll get more from Trev. We'll hear from Gary Barnett in 15 minutes. Want to hear from you. We'll get to some emails as well. But do you remember that first experience as a student in the student section, or did you get drug along with Big Brother, your cousin, some family member, or did you just find seats in the student section? I like Brent's comment. I learned a lot of new words that day when he was 9 years old in the student section. But a great announcement today. It's got to be approved here next week by Nebraska's Board of Regents, and then you can get going forward. But there's been a lot of elbow grease put in on this, and it needs to happen for Nebraska. And will the product on the field match the amenities off the field? The supply and demand part of it. Winding down hour one here at the Single Barrel, 9th and P. Hail Varsity continues.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time, Hail Varsity Radio here at the Single Barrel. 9th and P is where we're at. Inside the Graduate, Schmidt and Elijah Herbel. We're powered by Hurrdat Sports. Reminder about your friends from Dyer Law. If you're dealing with workers' compensation, if you're confused about the options for your workers' compensation claim, put the trust in the team at Dyer Law to help ensure that your rights are protected and you get the settlement you deserve. Call Dyer Law today at 402-393-7529 or visit dyer.law to chat with a trusted professional about your workers' compensation claim. That's dyer.law, dyer.law, 402-393-7529. And talk with them about workers' compensation. 489-1240, 489-1240 numbers to get in. More comments to get into. Spartan Stadium still has a trough. Our friends in Michigan have let us know that. The wrong Michigan team, not the Spartans, but you have Michigan, the Wolverines rolling into Lincoln. Greg is like, I'd give my last $10 to push the button and make South Stadium go bang. I don't have horrible memories about being uncomfortable, but the more and more Nebraska fans I've talked to this week, because we knew the announcement was coming today, is that, yeah, the personal bubble was no good. You need a little bit more comfort to go as far as your money continues to go and be spent, and then that's what Nebraska's working on.
And we had a call in from Roseanne during the break. She didn't want to go on the air, but that was her big complaint with South Stadium. She used to sit there with her family back in the 80s, and she said they were always packed in there like sardines. But she remembered, and I wonder if anyone else in the stream remembered this as well. Apparently, there was a student section tradition back in the 80s where they would take a female student and they would like pass her all the way to the top, like crowd surfing all the way to the top of the student section, then all the way back down. And she said she always had to avert her eyes during that because of just how dangerous it seemed. But there used to be, one girl who just every single week would get passed up to the top of the student section and brought all the way back down in everyone's hands.
Yes, and I did not realize that. Officer PJ, they called him Super Mario. He would hop the stairs like he was a Mario brother on those giant blocks like they were stairs. Okay? And the student section would count and chant with him. And Officer Snyder was the Lincoln Resource Officer at Southeast when I was going there. And just the best dude ever. And was fun. And he'd hop down. I mean, it was great because he'd race and go up, and then he'd race and go down. And his position was one of the corners, the southeast corner of Memorial Stadium, right where the flagpoles were at, up top there. So it was students loved him, man. It was good.
And Jason chimes in here on the stream that he remembers the officer and he remembers that girl getting passed all the way to the top.
Yeah. Was it the same gal, or did you have to win the lottery for that?
Roseanne said it's the same one every single week.
Really? We got to find out who she was.
Get her on for an interview.
Well, let's just see if it can be reenacted for this Saturday.
And
Maybe
Brian chimes in, we crowd surfed several sorority girls to the back of the Lower East Side on occasion, and they even came back.
Brian saying, yep, it happened. It's true. We have corroboration between Jason and Brian. I love it. Coach Barnett will chime in. Nebraska-Michigan, what are the odds?
The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Back into it. It's Hour 2. It's Hail Varsity Radio. We're live at the Single Barrel, getting ready for Nebraska-Michigan. He's getting ready for the golf course and then more college football. It's Gary Barnett. Coach, how we doing?
Doing well, Chris. Just watching this football season unfold. It's a crazy, cool year, I think.
It is awesome, and there's been some Deion fatigue. There's been a lot of Deion love, but there's been excitement, Coach, because, the Buffs are new. You've got some teams that are newer. Washington's one of them that folks are excited about. Just a couple that stick out that are trying to plant their flag. You still got Georgia and Michigan. Let me ask you to start off, who's been the wow team for you? Who's impressed you the most, either in person or watching all the games you do? Who's most impressive so far at the quarter turn?
Well, Chris, I knew last year that Washington was really good. And, I think they're putting that on display. I think, Oregon up front and close to what those guys could do last week, I think they're really good. You know what? Missouri is a big surprise. I do a show in Kansas City, and in those three teams, Kansas State, and Missouri, they've lost one game, and that's because they played one another in one of those games. So there's two teams 4-0, one team 3-1. I think Florida State's been impressive. So I watched the Notre Dame game. Notre Dame, so in my mind, deserved to win that game, but not the way they finished it. And they had coaching errors hurt that. But it's been fun to watch just these teams come on the scene. And of course I'm happy for Colorado, but we're not in that category of those teams that can finish this out as strongly as we started. But there's a lot that seem to be able to do that.
Well, you've got just pretty elite quarterback play. I was a gutsy win by Ohio State. And I thought Notre Dame was impressive. We got done with our weather delay and then got done with our post game and then got to watch the final fourth quarter. Coach Barnett, and what a finish. I mean, what an absolute finish. I can imagine the atmosphere. We've got news today about Nebraska doing a South Stadium renovation and just upgrades to Memorial Stadium. What's just the craziest, most awesome atmosphere you've ever been involved with?
Oh, gosh. I'll tell you, playing at Penn State, Ohio State. Penn State's cool too. Playing at Penn State, Wisconsin is crazy. It's always crazy every year. Florida State with the Tomahawk coming out, that was crazy. Lincoln was always fun. The game in 1990 when we had to come from behind and in the rain and the sleet was a great atmosphere. They're all over the place. Actually, but the Big Ten, playing at Ohio State and playing at Wisconsin were really difficult.
As a college student, I got to get to South Bend about 23 years ago when Touchdown Jesus and Notre Dame was painted red. Nebraska won in overtime. That's kind of my back pocket. My feet have not thawed out yet from the 1990 game you referenced. As a junior high kid in the south end zone, and then I think back to the Michigan game, just covering the game in 2021 with the unveiling of the light show, and what a score fest that was, and Nebraska didn't finish it, but what a great ball game to watch and see. Nebraska didn't find a way, but it's up there, and it just doesn't feel that way this week, Coach. I mean, the buzz is minimal. There's almost a reservation of, well, shoot, here comes Michigan, and they're really, really good, and Nebraska's not there yet. Do you feel that as a coach, if there's not as much buzz out there, if it's perceived to be a mismatch?
I don't. I sort of liked it when there wasn't as much buzz because that meant they weren't. They weren't respect. I always played the respect card in that situation. There's no buzz because we're not worthy. So I liked it that way.
What do you think of the tactics you've seen, and then the responses by some of the coaches with keeping score or receipts? As to what's being said about the programs from a motivational standpoint?
Well, I always kept receipts, but I didn't tell anybody about them. So, I didn't need that publicity, but every coach keeps receipts, if that's the term we're going to use, but everybody does. I don't care what they say, but they don't, when you start talking about them, then you're hoping to, that they'll shut up a little bit. But, everybody keeps their receipts. Trust me.
Did you ever have any receipts on Nebraska?
I'd have to think about that, Chris.
You're like, next question.
Yeah, I don't, I don't remember what they were, but I just remember in 2001 when I think I heard Frank say we had to change our practice because of how physical Colorado was. That gave me a big edge mentally. I said, when they have to change their practice for you, and you got an advantage. So,
well, Coach, let's talk. How's practice been this week for Colorado? SC comes in.
Well, they're pretty banged up. Colorado is banged up, and so it's they've been grinding. They were embarrassed by the performance last week, and they know they got their butts kicked, and so they're just trying to make the best that they can. They up front, both sides of the ball is where their challenges are. I don't know what can be done there. You can scheme it a little bit, both sides. You can bring a little more pressure to help out. But their answers, I won't know until Saturday. And, it's always a fine line as to how much you change, because you do have an area that you got to cover up or do some things to shore up. So it's just that, in their case, they got, I think, 2 or 3 defensive backs down. That makes it tough. They struggle with the inside run. They struggle with being able to run the ball inside as well. So, do you give up on it and just say, oh, let's do something else? Or do you say, no, I'm going to pound this thing? I think you scheme it a little bit. You do some things that guys are capable of, not try to do things that they're not capable of, and then go from there. And then, try to do some things that maybe they haven't seen before. But they have to execute better than they did. Shadur held the ball for a long time. They could not scramble out of the pocket because Oregon did such a good job on the edge. So it was, and that was because their tackles were getting walked off the ball. So it's not an easy solution when you're playing shorthanded in a couple spots.
Coach, you hit on something. Gary Barnett with us, Hail Varsity Radio, live at the Single Barrel. You do what they're capable of, and Nebraska's shifted a bit to more quarterback run. There's been a lot of option, not a lot of pitches with the option, but pitches could still be a factor with that option game. And Nebraska has kind of embraced the quarterback run. Harburg's won 2 games here, and that is something Nebraska's embraced. They're being physical, and I mean, we're talking 41 power pitch with Grant. I mean, it's plays from the 80s and 90s. It's T.O.'s playbook here, and I think Rule's gone to that because he likes what Nebraska is. He thinks they're capable of being a downhill running team versus more of a I don't want to say pro style, but a pass first team, and that's something that I'm interested to see how it matches up against Michigan. What do you think of Jimbo's team and this Michigan squad? Does Nebraska have a puncher's chance?
Well, of course they do. Stat-wise, they're not that far apart. They're both playing good run defense. And I agree with what Matt's done. Play to your strengths. They can run the ball. They've got 2 quarterbacks. The pitch, if the pitch hasn't happened, it's just because it hasn't been forced. And so they're saying, let's let the quarterback beat us with his legs. And, they've won 2 games doing that. But I think there's better than a puncher's chance. All the stats show that, there's that, Michigan isn't overwhelming on offense. They're only 405 yards a game. They're rushing for 167 yards a game. That's not overwhelming. And so, yards allowed, there's not that much difference in these 2 teams. So I think if Nebraska really wants to win this game and they can keep it close to the vest and get to the 4th quarter, they can win this game. Now, the odds are, 18 points. That's a spread. That's what it started at. I have no idea what it is today, but, that's not undoable. So I think you've got to say we've got a chance going into this thing.
The question mark, Coach, is about Nebraska's passing game, and it's not that they can't throw it. It's just the inconsistency of it. And I love play action. Nebraska's been vulnerable with their tackles when they've done play action, but you can do some pretty maddening things, can't you, to a defense off of option play action? I mean, I loved watching it growing up, and I know you and Nebraska both ran a lot of play action off option looks.
Well, when you run the option, you're going to see pretty much the same defense all the time, and so it makes it simpler to attack it. And really, the better you run, the better you should be able to throw. They complement each other, And it doesn't work the other way. The more you can run, the better, or more you can pass, the better you can run. But it does work the other way, that the better you are at running the ball, the more open your receivers become, because everybody wants and knows that they need to stop the run. When you assault the belly of a defense, you demoralize the other team. And if you can do that, then that team is not going to sit there and let you do it. They're going to bring an extra guy in, and now you got one-on-one coverage, or you've got one guy out of the secondary that's not in coverage. So, it's complementary. And if you are efficient enough at running the football, you force those changes.
Gary Barnett with us. Coach, we'll do some rapid fire before we get you out. Friday night, Utah's at Oregon State. What a ball game in Wazoo. A little too much Cougar, and they are unbeaten, but Oregon State gets to host Utah. That line right now is -3.5 Beavs.
Yeah, that's going to be a heck of a game, and I really can't wait to watch it. And, I love Utah. I really do, but I love Oregon State as well, and those are two rough and tumble football teams. Oregon State may be advantaged because it's home. That's where the 3 points comes from, but it's hard to bet against Utah. I would go with Utah on this thing. I just think they're too physical.
Are you taking the points? Northwestern for 2 in a row. They're underdog 27 points to Penn State.
No, I think Penn State's overwhelming right now. I think they're really good.
Mm-hmm.
So I think Penn State wins this handily.
Florida's on the road at Kentucky, -1 Wildcats.
Well, if you're playing at home, you should have a 3-point advantage if all things are even. So they're saying they aren't even. Florida, I keep wanting to bet on Florida because they have great athletes, but man, they let me down all the time except against Tennessee. But I'd pick Florida in this game, I think.
We were all off on Tennessee. I wanted to go Gators, but I didn't have the guts to do it. Georgia's at Auburn. Bulldogs 14.5 on the road at the Plains.
Yeah, Auburn's not ready yet. Georgia, this is Georgia's time to really, show something, and I think they will.
17's the number. Michigan 2:30 kickoff. Lincoln Fox. Do you take the points if you're a Husker fan?
With your money, yeah. Yeah, I would.
How about Mama's money?
How about my money?
How about Mama's?
I don't think so.
Mama's money. Mama's money.
Yeah, I think if I were a Nebraska fan, I'd take the points. But just out here watching, I think I'll stay with Michigan.
Okay. Kansas, Texas. I love Coach Lance, and Texas -16.5.
I think that's too many points. This team's good. Kansas is good, and they're not afraid of Texas. So I think that's probably about right. Mm-hmm. Texas is really good. I think if there's one team that's playing really well, it's Texas. But their numbers aren't crazy, mm-hmm. and Kansas's are pretty crazy. So I think this is the point. If you take the points in Kansas, I think you got a real chance here.
Ole Miss trying to bounce back. What a job by Saban. LSU survived. It's -2.5 LSU on the road.
Yeah, I like LSU. Mm-hmm. I do.
Last one is Notre Dame in trouble. They're at Duke. Duke looks really good. Notre Dame's favored by 6.
I think that's about the right spread. I think that they'll probably win this game by about 6. So it's your choice. But Notre Dame will bounce back, I think. But that was a tough loss, and some of that was coaching. So, but Eckler's doing a good job. That quarterback's really a good player, and they really are going to relish this limelight game. So I think it's about right, 6 points.
Coach, have a good weekend. Enjoy Colorado USC. Thanks for the time.
You bet, Chris. Great being with you.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Big thanks to Gary Barnett. Hail Varsity Radio continues here at the Single Barrel 9th and P. You're invited out, and what options you have here. We talked option football with Gary Barnett. Steak, pork chops, 200 whiskeys to choose from, some cold beer, and all sorts of just glorious appetizers. Love being in downtown Lincoln. We're up in La Vista tomorrow at the Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill, 4 to 6. Special guests joining us tomorrow at the bar. The bar for pregame, noon to 2, Saturday. Postgame, Real Red Reaction follows Nebraska-Michigan. We've been talking a lot about Nebraska football, the $450 million renovation project, and some of your creative thoughts. Not only would you spend money to blow it up, we heard Trev talk about it in hour one. Who would you pick to push the button or pull the trigger or flip the switch to bring it all down? We'll take suggestions, 489-1240, or can find us in the stream, Hail Varsity YouTube channel.
And we had a suggestion in from Dave and Elkhorn, Schmitty. This was pretty good.
So Dave and Elkhorn said what? He called right before we got to Coach Barnett. Dave and Elkhorn says what about who should push the button?
He says it'd only be fitting if you're blowing up part of Memorial Stadium to bring back Perlman and Eichhorst to do it.
Aye. Would they do paper, rock, scissors to see who got to do it? Or would they both put their hands on top of one another's and just do the plunge together?
They have to work in tandem, right? I think that only makes the most sense.
Yeah, there's too much. You're going to get all sorts of Nebraska fans just irate.
Or on the other hand, you could have Eichhorst with his hand on the plunger, and you could have Perlman just tell him to do it.
That's funny. Yeah, I don't know that there'd be you could sell like tickets to this thing.
Oh yeah.
When it happens, you could sell hard hats. You can sell troughs. Would you rather spend money on the ceremonial trough or the ability to push the button and let it go? Let's hear a little bit from Trev Alberts. We'll get to your comments as well. I want to hear about your first student section experience, either when you got to Nebraska or you went with a friend or family member, just what you were introduced to, because that is the theme here. It's not only about comfort and amenities and the new generation, the new era of, all right, can I log into an app that will bring my Runza or Fairberry to me and my cold beer perhaps, but can I also have like a party deck?
Well, here's something,
or standing room area.
This is where I was going. That's where I was going
to keep this thing intense and a true home field advantage. Because in 4 years, Elijah, the thought is with Matt Rule, Nebraska is going to be competitive and good at home. That's not been the case the last two coaches.
And there is in European soccer, it's very common. Standing room only was huge in European soccer for years and years. And then you had a disaster in which 92 fans were killed because they packed too many people into a standing room only section. People ended up being crushed. And what happened in European soccer, force of habit. What happened there is that they ended up creating what's called safe standing. So it's standing room sections, but there's rows with metal bars in between them to keep people from really pushing up against each other and crushing anybody. And then there are little foldable seats that are in the safe standing area as well. So if you feel like you need to sit down for a second, you can. There's little seats that flip down that you can use for a portion of time. I think that'd be great for the student section in particular, because those students only really sit during halftime, if at all. So I think you need to create a system that allows them to safely stand, because I got a text in from my buddy Jackson was talking about his first ever game at Memorial Stadium in the student section. He was standing after a couple cold ones on the end of a row, and somebody behind him lost his balance, stepped down, and kind of gave him a shoulder to the back, and he ended up somersaulting down the student section, down some stairs, knocking some people over. He was fine. He watched the rest of the game, but I think something like that, a safe standing area for students would be really big. It'd help improve the atmosphere. And hey, if the students are going to stand all game, let's make it as safe as possible for them.
Got to do it. Absolutely. Brian chimes in with what he remembers here. Mad Mike beating his drum, and Husker Bob dated the house mom at my fraternity.
That's great.
Brian, we will allow a free shout out this Thursday. What house were you in, my friend? And Brian follows up, hopefully no puppets were involved. Thank you for the clarification. Mad Mike, I kind of vaguely remember him. The name, the legend, and then Husker Bob, this dark-haired dude that had the kind of the Peaky Blinder hat. I don't believe there were razor blades involved with his hat. But, yeah, you had some characters for sure in South Stadium, at Memorial Stadium. But some thoughts from Trev. And let's go here. Are you somebody that's grandfathered in? Are you paying a little more but still below market value because your family has had seats for 75 years, for 50 years, since 62? And Elijah, if you're a betting man, does the grandfather clause go away?
Oh, it's going away in 2025. 100. I would almost guarantee it. It's the only way that makes sense to me that you can do this renovation, lower the capacity of the stadium, and still increase how much money you're making in ticket sales. Because when you think about it, if you got somebody sitting in a row who is paying $150 for their seats, the people who come in right next to him then have to pay more because he's paying under market value. I should say they are paying more, less than market value. The person next to him is going to have to pay over market value in order to compensate for the fact that somebody is still only paying $150 for their season tickets. So they're going to be paying $700. If everyone in that row is paying the exact same, you could overall lower the price on everybody, make it more economical for everybody to get in there. The problem being people who've been loyal and have had their season tickets for 70 years. Maybe they're no longer going to be able to afford the new rate, but generally speaking, that's the only way that makes sense to me that you can lower the capacity. And I mean, you're not going to lower the capacity and say, hey, we want to make less on tickets. That's not how business works. They're going to find a way to make more, if not more, at least the same. And I think the only way you can do that is by doing away with the grandfathering system. And Travis talked about that before. I think that was last winter whenever they first talked about getting the fan survey back and the results in. They talked about finding a way to do away with the grandfathering system. I think it makes a lot of sense that while you're doing the expansion, while everybody's getting shuffled around, hey, the seats that you had for 60 years aren't available anymore, we're just going to do away with the grandfathering system for everybody and make it a free-for-all so it's quote-unquote fair, but in actuality it's a way to get the fans in every single section paying the exact same amount, and therefore you can get in a more consistent dollar value. And Trev kind of talked about how they actually went and did the math on every single seat in the stadium to see how much they bring in on a yearly basis. I don't think you go do that math unless you're saying, hey, we can lower the prices for everybody if we do away with the chosen few that have had their season tickets for years and years and years and pay a low price.
I love the idea, too, of having kind of a club-level club in South Stadium. If you want to have a setup where you can go watch a ball game, kind of like the Hard Rock inside the Hard Rock, and kind of kick it there, because not everyone, and Trev gets it. Not everyone's there to watch the game. They might be there to hang out and be seen or be at the game, but they're still the diehards. Steve with a great point. I think the guy in front of line to push the button, since he originally took dynamite to this thing, is Smiley Jones. Do you know Smiley?
Who is Smiley Jones?
Steve Peterson.
I've never heard that nickname before.
Oh, dude. He just grinned at you. Yeah.
Never heard Smiley Jones before.
Really?
I've heard that weasel Steve Peterson. I've never heard Smiley Jones.
You edited that, didn't you?
A little bit.
I mean, I've heard that too, but it was that bleep
weasel Steve Peterson. Yeah.
That was good. Tomato, right? All right, let's hear from Trev here. Goals of the project here, and we'll get into some thoughts on Nebraska-Michigan in a second.
These three priorities are going to drive all of our thinking. These are directly a result of what our fans responded. Number one is create a facility that enhances the evolving fan experience. What fans expect in 2023 is perhaps slightly different than what it was 100 years ago. Number two, we need to modernize Memorial Stadium to ensure an infrastructure for the next century. Really, really important. We love the history that has happened in our stadium is pretty remarkable. We need to make sure that while we're here, that we're working on an infrastructure to ensure that it's in place for the next 100 years. And then finally, and this is really important to us, we want to create a facility that has equitable and affordable access to all of our fans. We learned a lot in that survey. And we learned that some of our fans across our state viewed that experiencing Husker football was at some levels beyond their financial capability. I think I mentioned publicly that as a result of this process that we found out that between seat licensing fees and ticket costs, we're the 5th most expensive ticket in college football. So we literally went through every seat at Memorial Stadium. We know the revenue that is attached to every single seat within Memorial Stadium. So that's really important.
So Trev Alberts will get some thoughts on Nebraska-Michigan. Vic chimes in.
And again, really fast before we get to Vic, again, as I said, I think him going and doing the math, at least their team doing the math on every single seat kind of underscores, I think that grandfathering is going to be going away, because I don't think you do that unless that means you're going to be changing some ticket prices and figuring some things out there to make it more equitable for everyone to get in. I think there's the moment where you can read in between the lines and say grandfathering is probably going to be dead soon.
Well, and if you want to go and you can afford it, you'll spend it, and they'll offer that to those who can afford it. And quite honestly, I mean, how many seats do you expect to see for sale, Elijah, when you're walking to the game Saturday? I saw a lot for sale against Louisiana Tech. And that's not to say that in 2 years it's going to be like that. It may not be like that the next time Nebraska comes home against Northwestern. But right now, the pulse is not disinterest, but just, well, we'll see. It's really a question mark. Vic is only the wine and cheese snobs want another club level. Listen, if it's more comfortable in the stands, you'll happily be in the South Stadium. But club seats are pretty awesome. Now, let's just call it like it is. That's my take. If you can afford it, go do it, Vic.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back with you. We're at the Single Barrel. It's Hail Varsity Radio Roadshow Thursday. Schmidt and Elijah Herbel. We're powered by Hurrdat Sports. More comments to get to. And Vic follows up by saying, I want more loud, obnoxious people making Michigan uncomfortable on third down versus, as he calls them, the cheese and wine crowd in the suites. You can have both. You can have somebody that wants to spend to be in a suite, and you can have the student section full throat losing their mind, making it a true home field advantage. You can have a hybrid, Elijah. Do you disagree?
Well, no. My take on the suites is I'm in the exact same boat as Vic, man. That wine and cheese crowd, they're going to be buying up the club level. No, wait. I'm not done yet. I'm not done yet, okay? I haven't finished my point. It's true. As I sit there in my peasant seat in the stadium, I go, those wine and cheese snobs. But as soon as somebody texts me and says, hey, I got an empty seat in the suite, you want to come watch the game in the suite? You better believe I'm watching that game in the suite.
You are. You are hauling up to the suite. You're going to have a Morgan and Coke, and you're gonna be like, man, the air smells better up here. That's where you're at. Don't kid yourself. And listen, the peasant seats, dude, it's awesome. It's awesome to be able to take your kid to a game.
That's where the environment's the best.
Yeah, that where it's South Stadium, where it's East, West, North, wherever you're at. In the crowd amongst the masses is incredible. In September, right? Asking Junior when Papa Al took him to the Michigan State game in 2018, Junior wearing his Spartan green. Junior's like, "That was cold and my team lost." Like, suck it up, dude. You went. So listen, there's no wrong answer, but the suite is, if you've had a chance to do it, it's cool. And listen, I have not sat in the crowd for forever, so maybe I should shut my face. But I'm used to it there, and if there's an opportunity for Mama to earn some extra ones, I mean, maybe someday we'll get season tickets. I don't know. you have Brennan. Brennan chimes in from the Black Hills. Let's call it the
Tomater Club level.
Yeah.
In honor of
that's for Cable Guy,
yes,
right?
Of course. And
sure.
And what I'll say about the club level seats is, I know the general fan and most of the people who listen to this show aren't interested in the club level, whether you're priced out or whether that's just not your crowd. But think about the people that are funding, the NIL collectives, that are paying the quarterback, that are doing all those things. Where do those people want to sit? The people that, the donors of substance, to bring back a Steve Peterson quote. Where do they
Actually,
want to
that's
sit?
a Bill Byrne quote.
Is
that
that
was Bill Byrne. It was Dollar Bill Byrne. It was donors of substance. And right now you're having the average Joe fan say, well, fine, you're funding this NIL. Go get a better quarterback. Okay, Brad loved the Steve Peterson comment and sat in the 200 level with seat backs last week. 0 leg room. Like my Section 2 bench, much better. So,
Brad,
yeah,
I'll turn it back to you, Brad, if you're still there in the chat. What did you think of the concession stands and the bathroom lines behind that 200 level seats, though? I've sat in those seats before, and I tell you what, he's not wrong about the lack of legroom. You have a little more shoulder room. Lack of legroom's real. Mm-hmm. But how about those concession stand lines? You can be in and out in 2 minutes of the concession stand. You can be in and out of the bathroom in 2 minutes. That is fantastic, and that's what I think I'm excited about with the South Stadium renovation, is you can get more areas like that where it's not a 15-minute wait in the concession lines, and it's not a 15-minute wait to go to the bathroom. You can get in, you can get out, you can get back to the game, and Brad, he does agree. That was great. The concessions and the bathroom part of the 200 level are fantastic, and I hope that kind of extends through the rest of the stadium with this renovation.
You have not lived until you've had someone's knee smack your back and you're peeing blood the next day. I mean, that is part of the rite of passage. Jasper's stepdad on Twitter posted the unfortunate day, November 8th, 1987, with Husker Bob having his heart attack. That was a sad day, is what Jasper says. The guy also chimes in on Twitter at HVarsity Radio. He says, do what the San Jose Quakes have done when it comes to fan setup. They've almost got a berm area. It's a giant berm area behind one of the scoreboards. So that is an option. But let's talk Saturday for a minute. Elijah, does Nebraska got to keep it within the spread to bring some fans back in this season from an interest level standpoint? I think we're at that point right now where you're paying attention, but your emotional investment is waning, and it's absolutely waned this week because of the concern. The buzz is down because you're concerned about getting your hopes up and then getting put out like a Marlboro Red. Mm. And that's why you know football as a Nebraska fan base. You're worried about getting stomped by a really great football team that's supposed to win the national championship or at least compete for it.
And to talk about parallels here, the last time a top 5 team played in Lincoln was Ohio State. College game day was here. What was announced?
2019.
What was announced in the week leading up to Ohio State, Nebraska? Oh, the new football facility, the Go Big project. Can you see some parallels between that week and this week here where, we're going to announce a renovation to Memorial Stadium. A top 5 team is coming to town on Saturday. I hope the result in the game on Saturday is different, but I can't be the only one that my ears are a little bit perked there, and I'm kind of seeing some resemblance between that Ohio State week and this Michigan week, the difference being there's no college game day or big noon kickoff in town this week.
I got to call a quick question out to Vic. Back to the whole cheese and wine snob / sweet versus the masses, okay? Because you're going to have both in the new South Stadium. You're going to have a section for the students to lose their mind, the band, the folks that want to sit in the stands, and then those folks that can afford the suites. Vic, you drink. I mean, I think if he was still with us, Pablo Escobar would be jealous of the tequila you drink, brother. Michael Jordan would be jealous of the tequila you drink. So you like finer things. You like some nice things.
Well, he said a little bit later that his big problem is it's 1,000 voices that aren't making noise.
You scream out the window. I think you did. Eat Beef says we all need some therapy. Well, I don't disagree with that for a lot of the Nebraska fan base right now, just because of some PTSD. Let's squeeze in a phone call if we have time. Who's with
Pete?
us? Pete, go for it.
Pete, you got us? Go for it.
Pete can't hear us.
Hello?
Pete's radio is too loud. Pete, go for it, brother. Go ahead. You're on the air.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good.
It's kind of a simple comment. If we play the next 3 years like we played the last 3 years, they ain't going to have to worry about filling South Stadium.
Very true. That's the question we started the show off with. The supply and demand need to meet. Pete, thanks for the phone call. Good observation. We'll wind down a road show next.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time here at the Single Barrel 9th and P Hail Varsity Radio Roadshow. We're powered by Hurrdat Sports. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. Find us on Twitter at Schmidt_radio at Herbal Essence. It's where you find Elijah on Twitter. Can also follow the show at HVarsity Radio or watch us on the Hail Varsity YouTube channel, 489-1240, 489-1240. If you're up in La Vista tomorrow, come see us. We're at the Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill, 4 to 6. Tom Chattel going to be on site with us for a little bit. We'll check in with him. Brock Ewart also going to be with us as Brock doing the game for Fox. Get his thoughts. We'll spend some time with the Pride of Fairbury, Bill Dolman, and Jacob Padilla. We hope we can run Jacob down. Busy night of high school football as well. Reminder to get buckled up. One of every 3 fatal crashes in Nebraska involves an alcohol-impaired driver. Why take chances? If you drink, don't drive. A message from the Nebraska Department of Highway Safety Office. Get the podcast, Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, or watch the whole thing on the Hail Varsity YouTube channel. Saturday, we want to see you out full force as we are at the bar, 1644 P Street. Our dear friends Seth and Greg, you know them from Lazari's, you know them from the bar. We are out there noon to 2 ahead of Nebraska-Michigan, and then immediately following Real Red Reaction, a live show at the bar. And I don't want to put a 2.5-hour turnaround time on that, but who knows with both of these offenses carrying. Big thanks to Brandon Vogel. Great thoughts on the stadium renovation. Great thoughts on Nebraska-Michigan. Incredible stuff from Gary Barnett and Bill Bender as well with some college football thoughts in Nebraska-Michigan. So it's been interesting. We Thursday, we spend a lot of time on the matchup, but that's just not where the heartbeat is right now. We'll probably have more time on that Saturday, probably more time on it tomorrow, Elijah, but the news that Trev broke out with $450 million, this plan, and Pete absolutely smoked it out of the park. If the next 3 years are like the last 3 years, that supply and demand thing's going to be a problem. That's why it's such a vital time for Nebraska. What do you think about where the Big Ten is going? Where's Nebraska at 25-25 at home in Big Ten play? And you need that home field advantage. And first and foremost, you need talent on the field. You have some talent. You've got some talented coaching on the field. Now you just got to go make it happen. And it may be a little bit too soon for Nebraska to do that Saturday.
Yeah, and we'll see, because I think back to that 2021 season, and the question in my mind right now is, can Nebraska create some juice even in a loss? And that kind of remains to be seen. But, like, think back, Nebraska generated some juice whenever they traveled to Oklahoma back in 21 and took that Oklahoma team down to the wire. Generated some juice, and it helped that you went and blew the doors off of Northwestern the following week. And that's what kind of led to, as Vic just said, that 90s-like energy in Memorial Stadium back whenever Michigan was in town back in 2021. And that's a great thought. Can Nebraska generate some juice even if they do lose on Saturday? It kind of depends on how you lose, but you're just waiting as a Husker fan, as I said a couple of times this week, for that proof of concept that, hey, what Matt Rhule's doing here can work. And I think you can get that proof of concept game in a loss to Michigan if you're able to keep it close. But I think that's what Husker fans want before they're going to be able to bring that juice back to Memorial Stadium, the proof that Matt Rhule is going to be the guy to get it turned around here.
Well, and Matt Rhule has scared the hell out of some really good teams, even in year ones. So we'll see if that happens. Talk to you at the Hale Varsity Club tomorrow, 4 to 6. See ya.